Quick note before we begin, this podcast uses AI-generated voices. Ian and I aren't in a recording studio. These are voice clones created with 11 Labs.
Why? Because as a working coach with a day job, I can't commit to weekly studio recording, but I can commit to weekly written content. This lets me deliver consistent insights without the production overhead.
The ideas are real, the framework is real, the voice is just the delivery method. Think of it as reading aloud, but automated. Now let's get into it. You made it. The promotion you've been working toward for years. Leader of leaders, senior manager, director level. Same office, same people, but suddenly everything feels different. And there's remarkably little guidance on how to navigate it. Welcome to the Braver Leader podcast. I'm Alex, and let me introduce you to leadership coach and co-host of this podcast, Ian Brown.
Thanks, Alex, and welcome everyone to Braver Leadership. Today, why the step from managing to leading leaders breaks high-performing leaders in predictable ways, and the framework that actually works.
Ian, you've spent a decade coaching leaders through this specific transition. What's the pattern you see?
Well, Alex, the leadership development market has a curious blind spot. Spend any time looking at what's available and you'll find two groups drowning in support. First-time managers get shelves of affordable books, early careers programs, all the here's how to delegate advice. Step into the C-suite and investment jumps. Nearly 60% of companies spending heavily on their most senior leaders.
But between those two?
Remarkably little, despite research showing that managers at this level have larger skill gaps than the people they manage. It's assumed you'll figure it out yourself. Extrapolate from your first-time manager experience. Mimic the executives above you. Hope the patterns emerge.
And when they don't?
When week 2 hits and everything feels unfamiliar, despite being in the same office with the same people, you're left wondering if you're the only one struggling. You're not. This transition breaks high-performing leaders in predictable ways, not because they lack capability, but because the tools that got them promoted aren't the tools they need to succeed in the new role.
So what actually happens when someone steps into leading leaders?
Your direct reports are seasoned professionals themselves. Some have been doing their roles longer than you've been in yours. They don't need you to show them how to do their work. What they need from you is something else entirely. And your brain, which has spent years building an internal model of what good leadership looks like, hasn't caught up to what that something else actually is.
You call this the identity lag?
That's right. I call it the identity lag. The gap between who you were, a high-performing manager, an expert in your domain, and who you need to become. A leader of leaders, a systems thinker, someone who leads through influence rather than expertise. Your external role changed on day 1. Your internal sense of yourself? That changes slowly.
So you're performing a role that feels
bigger on the outside than it does on the inside. And that gap creates friction.
When does this matter most?
There's a specific period for everyone stepping up into their first leader of leaders role. I call this the vulnerability window, roughly weeks 1 to 16 in your new role. During this time, you're simultaneously at your most visible and your most uncertain. The grace period has ended. People are watching how you make decisions, how you handle pressure, how you show up in difficult conversations, but you're still figuring out what this role actually requires.
And the patterns you establish during this window?
The patterns become your credibility. Get it right, and you build a foundation that carries you for years. Get it wrong, and you spend months or years recovering. Most leaders don't know this window exists. They treat the first few months as settling in time. But your team, your peers, the leaders above you, they're already forming lasting impressions.
So where did the Braver framework come from?
Over the past decade of coaching leaders through this specific transition, I noticed the same patterns emerging. Different people, different industries, different organisational cultures, but the same predictable breakdowns. The leader who's technically brilliant but can't stop solving their team's problems for them. The leader whose anxiety transmits to their entire department without them realising it. The leader who says they value one thing but their decisions consistently reflect something else. The leader who avoids difficult conversations until small issues become organisational problems.
These aren't character flaws.
No, they are not. They're actually gaps in capacity that become visible when the role outpaces the internal operating system. And they map to 6 specific dimensions. The braver framework.
6 dimensions. Let's walk through them. First of all, B for behavioural credibility.
The alignment between what you say, what you decide, and what you consistently do. At senior levels, people watch more closely than they listen. They're not judging your words, they're watching for coherence. Do your decisions reflect what you said mattered last week? Do you follow through on commitments when pressure spikes? Credibility at this level isn't built through charisma, it's built through consistency, through being predictable in the ways that matter.
And when this is weak? So then comes R for regulated presence.
Regulated presence is your ability to stay emotionally steady when others are activated. Here's what most new leaders of leaders don't realise. Your nervous system becomes contagious infrastructure. When you walk into a tense meeting carrying unprocessed anxiety, the room tightens. When you absorb pressure from above and unconsciously transmit it downward, your team starts operating from threat response rather than clear thinking.
You don't lead the room.
You set the weather. Regulated presence isn't about suppressing emotion or performing calm you don't feel. It's about having the capacity to steady yourself before you enter the room, so your reactivity doesn't scale across the system. When this is weak, you work harder internally than it appears externally, and your team pays the cost.
So then we have A for adaptive capacity.
Adaptive capacity is the ability to adjust your thinking, style, and approach as context shifts without losing your core. It's about controlling your response to rapid changes around you. The step up to leading leaders breaks your old success pattern. What got you promoted, being the expert, having the answers, executing brilliantly, becomes what limits you. Micromanaging, bottlenecking decisions, solving instead of enabling. You need to let go of expert mode. And that feels like giving up your competitive edge.
So adaptive capacity is
The discipline of recognising when the old pattern no longer serves and having the flexibility to try something different even when it feels unfamiliar. When this is weak, you keep applying solutions that worked in your last role to problems they weren't designed to solve.
We're getting the hang of the braver model now, and the V stands for values in motion.
Everyone knows that values are important, but for leaders of leaders who can no longer be in the detail of everything, values are beacons, signals to the team, visible in decisions, not just stated on slides. At higher levels of leadership, ambiguity increases. The right answer isn't always clear. Competing priorities pull you in different directions. Senior stakeholders want contradictory things. In those moments, your values become decision filters, not aspirational statements, actual tools for navigating complexity.
So people can predict your logic.
They understand what you'll prioritise when certainty disappears. Your decisions aren't reactive, they're grounded in something consistent. When this is weak, your team sees you compromise in ways that don't sit right, and they start wondering what you actually stand for. We're getting there, and so on to the last 2 elements of braver, and that is E for empathetic edge. In the age of leading with artificial intelligence, this does feel important. Empathetic edge is the ability to combine care with clarity, empathy without avoidance. Leading leaders demands difficult conversations, performance issues, misaligned priorities, boundaries that need reinforcing. The leaders who struggle here tend to fall into one of 2 patterns. They lean so hard into care that they avoid the difficult part people-pleasing, or they lean so hard into clarity that they create emotional distance, cold efficiency.
Empathetic edge holds both.
To be direct about what needs to change while maintaining genuine care for the person navigating it. When this is weak, tough conversations get delayed. Small problems become organisational issues, or people comply but feel diminished.
We have almost all the ingredients except the last, which is R for reflective intelligence.
The discipline of making meaning from experience in real time. At senior levels, you don't get much direct feedback. People are careful about what they say to you. The feedback loop that helped you develop earlier in your career largely disappears. Reflection becomes the feedback loop, the ability to pause after important interactions and ask, what just happened here? What pattern am I seeing? What's the data telling me about my impact?
Pattern recognition as a practice.
Exactly. It's how you course correct before small misalignments become major credibility issues. When this is weak, you repeat the same mistakes without realising it. You're working hard, but not learning fast enough.
So these 6 dimensions, are they a checklist?
That's what I like about Braver. They're not a checklist. They're not steps you complete sequentially. They're an operating system. And the great thing about an operating system is that you can add more things to it, such as a new role or responsibility, and the operating system still endures. We can all remember going on courses, agreeing with the instructor, and then before we've even reached the car, we can't remember what we set out to do. An operating system gives you a way of understanding what's actually required to lead effectively at this level, and where your gaps are creating friction you might not fully see yet.
And most leaders step in strong in some, vulnerable in others.
Everyone steps in with something. That's what likely got you promoted in the first place. Most leaders step in strong in 2 to 3 dimensions and vulnerable in the others. That's normal. The question isn't whether you have gaps. The question is, do you know which ones matter most right now? Because the leaders who succeed in this transition aren't the ones who arrive fully formed. They're the ones who can identify which dimension needs attention first and build capacity there before the patterns lock in.
So what's coming in this series?
Over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to walk you through this transition, not in theory, in practice. Each week, I'll take you into a specific moment in the first 100 days. The disorientation of week 2, the identity lag of weeks 3 to 6, the vulnerability window of weeks 9 to 12, and show you what's actually happening beneath the surface. You'll see how the braver dimensions show up in real situations, how to recognise when one of them is creating friction, and what practices actually help you build capacity there.
This isn't generic leadership advice.
It's a framework built specifically for the transition from managing to leading leaders. For the moment when your old playbook stops working and you need something more calibrated to the complexity you're now navigating.
What if someone's listening and thinking, I'm not in a leader of leaders role yet?
If you're positioning yourself for the step up, this framework shows you what ready actually looks like. The gap to be closed to be a credible candidate. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having capacity in these 6 dimensions before the stakes are higher. The leaders who get blocked at this level often wait to feel fully ready before they step up. But the work doesn't start when you get the role. It starts now. Building regulated presence, practicing adaptive capacity, aligning your decisions with your values, even in your current role.
Because when you step into leading leaders,
the whiplash hits immediately, and the capacity you've been building becomes the foundation you stand on.
So where should people start?
If you want to know which braver dimension needs your attention first, take the 5-minute diagnostic, and I've put the link to that in the show notes. It'll show you where you're strong, where you're vulnerable, and 3 specific actions you can take this week.
And for weekly insights on this transition, practical, psychologically literate, free of corporate fluff, subscribe to Braver Leadership on Substack.
The work doesn't start when you feel ready. It starts now.
Next time on the Braver Leadership podcast. The moment everything changed. What actually happens in week 2 when the whiplash hits?
Thanks for listening, everyone.